pre-COVID, and I participated in it was a program, a course called The Hardest Conversations, right? I think that was the name of it, at Sixth and I, which is like a Jewish community center organization in DC. And it was about Israel-Palestine. And we had what? It was like 6 meetings, 10 meetings. I don't remember how many meetings.
6, maybe 8.
Maybe 8 meetings. Yeah. Not more than 8 meetings. And the idea was to open up this topic and discuss it from different angles with different voices. And you were there for, I don't remember now, it was like for the entire time you were running each one, right? You were like one of the organizers of the event.
Brought in, so it's a dyad, right? The rabbi stuntman would bring a Palestinian to give the Palestinian perspective, and she would give the Zionist perspective.
Yeah.
And it would take different, themes. And I liked how it was paid, like people would pay to attend the sessions, and it would say, if you're here to make a statement, don't apply. Right? If you're here to learn something you wouldn't hear somewhere else, yeah, that's the place for you. But if you want to make statements, this is not the place for you.
Yeah. So people didn't really make statements, right? People showed up with a fairly open mind, and we split into groups, and you guys handed us sheets to study and then to come back and review and discuss. And I remember that my takeaway right from the beginning was, oh my God, this guy Nizar, he's blowing my mind. And I remember telling you right afterwards, Nizar, you gotta do a podcast. We need to get you out, and we gotta just promote you to millions of people. I think that was my immediate take, and probably my long-term take too, right? Every single time I meet you, I'm like, to do a podcast, do something. We need to just do something. And then I think at some point I reached out to Adar, and I was like, Adar, you got to speak to Nizar. You got to get Nizar on the platform. And since then, I have reached out to you for support and advice and encouragement and motivation. And so, first of all, thank you for everything that you've done.
Sure.
To honestly, so much of your work and how you think about things has been so inspirational. So I appreciate everything that you've done so far.
I appreciate your initiative. I mean, I'm definitely not a person who likes taking risks, and you don't seem to have a concept of risk being a scary thing. So I admire that about you. Where are we in your plan to global domination in your AI thing?
We're getting there. It's I'll tell you one thing that has been happening in here in the community, and people here can probably resonate. It's so when we started out, we had an incredibly selective group of people to do this on Discord, and people had applied to join a program, and it was very internship-like and very research-like. And so people came in with expectations of how to conduct themselves in a very particular way. One of the things just so that we're all on the same page, the idea here is to create this type of environment where we can understand how conversations actually unfold, so that we can go and build and engineer the proper AI and the right product, so that when we go to market, we will have been learning an enormous amount from how conversations are actually taking place online. And so this environment that we're in right now, this Discord, is essentially like a proto environment for us to just learn how things are actually done. And when everybody here has joined everybody here who's joining these conversations, we are on the back end are constantly thinking, okay, the conversation went this way and that way and this way and that way, and there's tension here and then there's discord there. How do we make sure that we build the right product to support and facilitate the actually good faith environment where proper productive conversation can unfold? And so we've been actively doing this sort of behind the scenes.
Wait a second. What defines productive?
That's a very difficult question to answer. We have a bunch of different metrics, and I remember when the war, I think, just first started, I told you about we need to have conversations that reduce hate, and I think you even pushed back on that. Well, sometimes hate is a symptom of something much deeper, and we should continue to excavate towards something much deeper. So I think whatever answer I'll give you right now, I'll give it with a caveat that we're continuing to explore it. We certainly know when things derail, and when things become really bad. When people have conversations and they manage to start to understand where the others come from, and they have a more and more accurate perspective of what are the true desires of the other side, and are willing to at some point start to engage in a productive and in a productive manner of understanding each other's needs and how to engineer a world where we can satisfy each other's needs.
Yeah.
I feel like that's moving us in the right direction. But the one of the takeaways from the first set of participants in this environment was that it was very tame, and it we didn't have any, and nothing was combustible, and everything was very kind of like easy. So much so that we started thinking, man, maybe the AI needs to stoke things up, because people don't really seem to be able to to disagree on much. And then Adar kept telling us, no, no, just once you open it up, there will be enough people that are going to come in, and all of the traditional pathologies that you see on the internet will unfold here as well. And I feel like that's what we've been witnessing over the last few weeks on Discord. We have seen the conversations reaching higher, like they've become more strident, they've become more hostile, they've become more difficult to have. And I feel like because of that, by virtue of that, we are replicating what we're seeing online elsewhere. And that's a good sign, because we have an actual, we have a realistic environment now, and with all of the attendant difficulties. And right now is the time to actually roll up our sleeves and figure out how exactly do we make conversations succeed. And anyway, you've been a model for how to do that and how to attempt that. But anyway, that's where we are in terms of our journey towards world domination.
Permission to annoy you?
Please.
Just because I really think this is, I don't know anybody else who's doing this kind of work, and I think it has a lot of potential. I think we need to double down on really trying to quantify a la, Brene Brown, right? So she defines shame, she defines curiosity and what have you. So when you say productive, when you say learn, a good conversation, all of these need to be like define it in a way and then correct it afterwards.
Yeah.
But you cannot improve what you don't measure.
Yeah.
So I think, and I'd be interested in some qualitative analysis of the conversation. Because, so for example, you'd say it was a strident conversation, maybe to you, but maybe to an Italian it's not, right? So it depends on that's how you register it, right? And it doesn't need to be like a geographical culture. It's just like you come from a loud family or you can come from a very silent family, right? So all of that needs to, I think we need to like monitor it and just give it names and measure it. That's one. And then you need the, make subject that to which you are object, make object that to which you are subject, right? Which is because you're in it, you don't know if it's just your bias and your whatever you got exposed to became the norm. So when you say the conversation is real, is it objectively real? Is it, because there is no objectively real, is it real to the 12 million people in between the river and the sea kind of real versus what you've experienced as reality, or worse, what whoever the community, the population that's in this Discord channel uh, falls within the spectrum of real, right?
Yeah, I think the closest that we've gotten. So first of all, we know we have some clear metrics that look like if people have conversations and then they leave and they never come back, we say, okay, well, that probably wasn't good. If we
Even that is an assumption. Maybe
it's an
they thought,
assumption. We have,
yeah.
yeah, they might have left because now they're going on to do activism on the ground, and there's lots of different reasons. But we know that if people leave in a blaze of glory after cussing everybody out and threatening to kill each other, right? Like, and at some point we can we know that's probably not the most. That isn't the kind of engine that we want to generate in the world, right? So
It's kind of like, I hate talking to right-wing Israelis, but it's kind of, these are the people I need to talk to because these are the people I have a problem with, right? So it's kind of like the fact that this person got pissed off and cussed everybody and left. Well, he came for a reason, or she came for a reason, or they came for a reason, right? And them realizing that this is too much might be actually the beginning of a revelation for them. So that's more the reason to not let them go and go see if we can do something with them, right? So I think, I mean, we don't need to bore the people out unless they're interested in this.
Yeah.
But these are the kinds of operative conversations we need to have of how to make the most out of this, especially in that the our brain's bias for confirmation bias is really very strong. So we think we're open-minded, we think we're whatever, right? But we underestimate how we do not like uncertainty. We are addicted to certainty, or at least to feel good. So the more uncomfortable the conversation, you feel it's good, yeah, because I'm feeling uncomfortable. But that's the more difficult it becomes for you to actually make an objective assessment because you've been in pain for so long. The urge for getting out of the pain is stronger, right? So the bias to see things as getting resolved, or like, this is good, let's stop, is more an emotional decision than a scientific decision of, yeah, this is valuable information, right?
Yeah, there's a book I just started reading called The Constitution of Knowledge, and it's about basically just like this is especially for people that are very educated and intelligent. The more passionate you are about a subject, the more likely you are to fall for various cognitive biases, right?
Yeah.
And so you might be able and that's why I often feel like the people that are not the Israelis and the Palestinians, that are from the outside coming in, are incredibly important, I feel, to the conversation. And they're not they have a role to play. Everybody has a role to play here. So trying to create that kind of environment. Justin just put something in the chat, which makes me think that maybe, Nizar, maybe we could spend a minute to tell the audience, people here might not be familiar with you yet, who you are and what your background is.
Just a second, I don't see where Justin is, where the message is.
It's in there's a chat bubble. If you hover on the top right, it'll say show chat.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, now he's there. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you. Okay.
Where did you grow up?
Okay.
What is your background, and how did you come to do the work that you do?
Sure. By the way, how long do we have?
I think we should probably open it up to Q&A in like 15 minutes, maybe 10, 15 minutes. And then we'll keep it up until the hour. And I suspect that the community will want to keep you here and engage with you while I go to another room. Yeah.
I can stay till, I can say, I have a 3:30 thing. Where are you, by the way?
Right now in New York. I came back a couple of days ago. I was in SF for a little bit. We did a big AI conference, and in Israel beforehand.
Well, I know. News Story, what? National Science Foundation?
In SF in San Francisco.
Oh, excuse me. I didn't know. I thought they called it Frisco. Okay. Me, I was born and raised in Dubai, 1974. Yes, I'm 50 years old. I'm a fossil. My father was Palestinian from the West Bank, from a village called Birzeit, north of Ramallah. It's famous for its college. It's like the Harvard of Palestine. And my mother was Italian. I'm the youngest of 4. So lived all my life in Dubai and graduated from there. Then went and studied in Beirut at the American University of Beirut. Just a year after the civil war ended, so I learned shitloads of. Are we allowed to swear, or is this like virgin ears?
Because it was like really very raw, so just so many stories about how dysfunctional societies, like how societies, spiral into this dysfunction. But at the same time, it was funny because they would say like it was so not random, but like so chaotic. They actually had a lot of freedom, right? Because there was no state there. So after the war ended, they said we actually kind of missed the freedom we had, right? Because nobody could stop you, right? Like you do whatever you want, but also you didn't know if you lived another day. So each day was really rich and valuable, right? And they no longer have that. And then I went in 99, I moved with my parents to Birzeit, because in 99, we were all under the impression that the Palestinian state was right around the corner. So we moved there, we built a house. I worked in Bethlehem at an organization, a research center that looked at the environmental impact of Israeli settlements in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And then a year later, we had the Intifada. And there I learned a lot because I lived a year before the Intifada, and then I lived the Intifada. So there's so much I learned about what is possible and what's not possible, and the certainty with which you thought something was impossible and then suddenly it happens, right? And the certainty that something is possible, but then you realize, oh, wow, it's really very difficult, right? Or take for granted. So, I mean, that's where I learned, that's my source of hope, is that I'm wrong so much of the time, right? So like that, my pessimism and the sense of and my cynicism is from the fact that my knowledge is limited and I don't know what I don't know. And I've been surprised so many times, even painfully surprised. But that also says that so much more is possible. There's so much, there are so many more ways in which something can, unfold than I could ever, capture. And therefore, I don't know, it might, peace might, happen at some point, or freedom might happen, right? So I think that was the biggest learning I got. After 3 years of doing that, I did a degree in international boundary studies in London. My boss in that research center told me, well, we're going into final status negotiations and we don't have a border expert. It would be great if you do that degree. Indeed, I did it. I loved it. London was a lot of fun. And part of why it's fun is because it has very little Brits. It doesn't have many Brits. It's mostly international. And then I was actually recruited to the Palestinian negotiating team from London to be the border policy advisor. So from end of November 2003 till November 2008, 5 exact years, I was the policy advisor on all border-related issues for the Palestinian negotiating team, which was fascinating because Palestine is such a small place. I actually did get to work with the president, with the Prime Minister Fayyad, with Dahlan. I was in meetings where Livni was negotiating with, Saib Araqat and what have you, right? So I was in the room, just to quote Michael Bolton's, Michael Bolton? Is his name? No, Michael Bolton is a singer. The idiot Bolton, the one with the stupid mustache that is complete right-wing nut, neocon. He has a book like In the Room, I think, or something. Anyways, so what I learned there is the extent to which people outside of policy really have no idea how policy is made, right?
John Bolton, that's right.
Don Bolton. Michael Bolton is the singer.
Yeah.
Songwriter turned singer. And I realized that that's why so many people outside of policy are really barking up the wrong tree. And that's why you're not having changes, because people don't realize, have such a warped understanding of power and how policy is made. So their theory of change is just mistaken, right? It's off target. And the peace negotiations were like, it was very disheartening because like it wasn't going anywhere. The Palestinian in me says, well, because if Israel didn't want to do something, it just didn't. But the negotiator in me would say that the two parties had different goals. They weren't aiming for the same thing. The Palestinian wanted a fully independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital, and a solution for the refugee problem that is fair and just, but also acceptable, negotiated with Israel. And this is a very important point, that accepting to exercise our right to self-determination on only 22% of what we consider our homeland was already a huge compromise. So there was a principled position of asking us to compromise on the compromise is just unacceptable, right? And on the Israeli side, of course there is a spectrum, but in general, the goal across like right wing or left wing, the goal was, okay, you have some autonomy over some cities. Let's see how you perform on security and fighting terrorism, and then we'll consider if we give you a bit more area, right? So the starting points were very different, and the Israeli side was just open-ended, right, and performance-based, while the Palestinian side was, no, we need a date where we know that we're going to have a foot, like we need to. So we were not going to come to an agreement on that. But then the fighting between Fatah and Hamas is what really broke my heart in 2007. That's when I realized, okay, I have no idea what I'm doing here. I genuinely thought that Palestinian blood was a red line. And the shit I saw from both of them, Fatah and Hamas, really shocked me. So the fact that I was so shocked at their behavior and that they were more worried about the other than they were worried about Israel made me realize that I clearly don't understand what's happening, and therefore there's nothing useful I could do here. So I left towards end of 2008, but I had taken the decision back in 2007. And a good friend of mine who also worked in negotiations persuaded me to take this leadership course at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. And she said, Nizar, you don't understand. This course was made for you. And she was right. It was made for me. I fell in love with it. Like the first day, it was like exactly what I was looking for, like how to wrap my head around hope, how to wrap my head around leadership. And it just gave me so many tools and lenses to see many universes of options. So I loved it so much that I stayed one more year to be a teaching assistant with my professors. So Marshall Gantz on narrative and leadership, and Ron Heifetz on adaptive leadership, and also Dean Williams. And that's in order to sink my teeth in those theories. And then in 2011, I moved to DC. My ex was a Palestinian who was living in DC. So we got married and I moved there. Worked 2 years at the Palestinian delegation, which is like the Palestinian representative office in DC, which was fascinating because it got me to go into advocacy and PR and getting to know the Hill and the State Department. So it opened a lot of doors for me. And it was interesting how DC is a very hostile place for the Palestinian narrative. Yet we had better access. More people were interested in talking to us than others, right? So, for example, I'd walk into a room with 100 people. People would want to talk with me, even those that hate us, right? And not with the Thai representative, right? So I found that interesting, that we are so disproportionately represented and seen because we're Israel's problem. So again, it was so counterintuitive that, we actually have that access for all the wrong reasons, but it's still access, right? And then after 2 years, I worked in a think tank that was more Arab world. I got to actually, that job was training Arab NGOs and think tanks on advocacy. And it was 2013 to 2015, so just after the Arab Spring. And I got to actually work in Libya, in Yemen, in Egypt, and Tunisia, Morocco, and Iraq. And then 2016, I decided to just focus on my consultancy, which is training people on leadership, negotiations, and advocacy. I think 2009 also, I started this gig at the GW. I teach negotiations, one credit negotiations skills class, which is a lot of fun. It's just over a weekend, Saturday, Sunday. And on the side, I do trainings on narrative, on leadership, on adaptive leadership. Since the war, I've been coming on the news a lot, getting paid for like giving my political analysis because again, I have access to information about the Palestinian perspective. And general, like also, I get a lot of macro questions about Iran, Turkey, Israel, the US, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, and what have you. And since a few months ago, I'm focusing more now on a speaking business. So I'm trying, I just launched my website and I'm looking for gigs where for people or organizations, groups that want to understand the Palestinian perspective and see what is something useful and effective that they could do. So it could be synagogues, churches, think tanks, whatever it is. So that's where I am, and I'm doing some research here and there. Some of it, I think I told you about. We're doing some research on like quantifying conflict resolution. Did we talk about this?
No, I don't think we did. No, but I have a few people I want to introduce you to then.
Sure. Okay, I'll shut up.
So Nizar, real quick. So you were you were in London. You were recruited to join as a border advisor for the potentially final status negotiating team. You had done that. You had seen that ultimately led nowhere, and then you took the negotiation class and the leadership classes and all of that stuff at Harvard. In Harvard, what did you learn from those courses and from your time there that you think would have given you perhaps different tools or a different lens through which to see the actual negotiation having taken place?
Mostly, well, two things. The bigger one, the more impressive one was everybody knows that our subconscious has an effect on us and what have you. Just the extent to which that's the case. That in fact 90% of our decisions are subconscious. 80 to 70% of our decisions are actually emotional. We feel a certain way about something, and we decide based on that. I like it, I hate it, whatever. And then the rational side of our brain rationalizes, gives it a rational explanation that is actually not true. The reason for your decision is emotional, and you're just giving it a rationalization, right? The extent to which we do that is so great that it humbled me, right? So especially when I was a teaching assistant, when I was getting those reflection papers from the students in my section, so it would be 8 people in a room discussing a case, and each, I kid you not, what's your name? Adam. Each paper was as if this person was in a different room. Like if I wasn't a TA and reading those papers, and I was in the room with them, right? It's like, oh my God, like no wonder people don't get along. It's like if you have such a completely different take on what just happened, and this person notice things that you completely, of course people are gonna like be pulling hairs and what have you, but more so how much of what was happening in the room was just these 8 people projecting stuff from their history, right? So they're not reacting to Adam, they're reacting to what Adam represents to them. They're acting to who Adam reminds them of, right? So that's where the hope was, that okay, so a lot of that is actually internal. It's not external. It's stuff that's, so we can work on people. People have agency over themselves, right? Because events happen, but how we make sense of them is really a decision, right? That somebody get killed, oh, this is good, this is bad. Somebody, got promoted, this is good, this is bad. That part, like the event happens, you have no control over it. That's true. But the explanation, the meaning is agentic. You're the one who does that, whether consciously or not consciously, right? So therefore, you could do something with that. It's not static. It's not static.
How deep does this hope reach then? So for example, would you now be hopeful that given those tools, if you were to rewind the clock back to 2003 to 2008, to that negotiating team, is there something to be done there, or at that point it's already too late? You needed to have started much earlier at the population level, at the society level?
I wouldn't know, right? Because I realized that I don't know what I don't know. So I learned that I cannot I cannot say with 95% confidence, just to use a technical term, that the conversation should have happened earlier, right? Because it made absolutely no sense that somebody like Ariel Sharon, the representative of the settlement movement, was the one who removed settlers from Gaza, right? Now, of course, in hindsight, it makes sense because it was strategically useful. But if you knew everything you knew about Ariel Sharon up to that date, like say 2004, like if you told me Ariel Sharon is the one who's gonna pull settlers from that, it's like, what the fuck are you talking about, right? Are you fucking crazy, right? Just like we were surprised that Trump won, right? So the fact that we keep getting surprised is evidence that we're really clueless, and therefore, like, we don't know what could happen, right? Everything is possible, anything is possible, right? But for example, what I would have done differently was to focus more on grassroots. That's what matters, because what I found in the negotiations was that President Abbas and Prime Minister Olmert actually did come to bridging proposals, but neither of them thought that they could sell it to their constituents, right? So that's when I realized the problem with Oslo was that it was agreed in secret, that it was people on the top deciding what's good for people, even if they were democratically elected, even if they were representative, right? But the people who lost loved ones, who paid the price, who are in danger, were not involved in the process, right? So if we bring the politics down to the grassroots, people would own the decisions. A lot of the stuck from both the Israeli and the Palestinian side, I would argue, was bad leadership, because good leaders would have told their constituents what they needed to hear and not what they wanted to hear. Most leaders in Palestine and Israel were doing the latter. Had they actually prepared their people that, no, this is going to be really hard, but it's still better than continuing war. And of course, we're living the consequences of that, right? But most people didn't see that. We overestimate our ability to influence things, right? That's why we bet, despite the fact that we know for a fact that gambling, like the house, like mathematically speaking, right, the odds are like 8 or 10 times for the house, and we still think that we have a better chance, right? So that nature, that bias that we have is what causes a lot of what we're seeing in the conflict, that there are parties who genuinely believe, as horrible as things are, they are interpreting things. They're interpreting that things are going their way, that they need to hold on because the future is better for them and worse for the other. That belief is what is at the root of what we're seeing, right? It doesn't make sense. It seems dysfunctional, but when you believe, right? Because the problem, the enemy of truth is not lies. The enemy of truth is conviction. That's the problem. When you're so convinced, you're just not willing, not entertaining a new idea.
Yeah, but by the way, we just like from my vantage point, I see a lot of people, technologists in the AI world, who are working on like deliberative technology and conflict resolution and negotiation. They're operating at that top layer of leadership, and a top layer that, in my opinion, I'm too cynical of. I don't actually believe that that's where the theory of change that I operate under is going to come from. It's going to come from the people themselves, and we need to find a way to actually scale these conversations through like a new technological infrastructure.
Yeah, but that's because you're under the effect of my propaganda. I influenced you to think that. My question to you is, what do they think? What's their theory of change that thinks that they need to talk to the leaders, and why do you think talking to the leaders or trying to influence the leaders is not the way?
You asking me for what the rationale is that I have?
Yeah, what's the difference between your rationale, not believing that engaging the leaders is, and what's their rationale in talking to the leaders?
I just see poor leadership, right? Like I see the kind of leadership that isn't willing to. It might just be too electorally expensive. What's that?
You believe the individual, the characters that we have now, do not have the capacity?
It's more likely that the systems that we have in place incentivize leaders to capitalize on existing beliefs as opposed to changing their beliefs, showing them the reality of what's necessary and what's possible. And because it's just easier. And so it might just be drawing the wrong crowd. But so I don't blame them individually all that much. I just have very little trust that they're able to weather the kinds of storm, right? Like you should be willing to make those steps that could get you killed. That should be, I suspect, an expectation when you're in those positions. But we have to just shift the electorate, at least in democracies. But I imagine that in non-democracies just as well, you have to shift the mindset of the street. But before we go too deep into that, because I want to open it up, you did mention about us barking up the wrong tree because we don't actually understand how the policy actually unfolds. Can you just say a little bit more about what exactly you mean by that?
So first, people know that the media is not covering exactly what's happening, but the extent to which that's the case, right? Because I was in events, and then like I was there when the decision was made and the thing was signed, and then I see what was getting reported was like a complete lie. And the fact that this media would think that they can get away with it is because they've gotten away with it before, right? Like they're not stupid, they want to make money, right? So all of them are just catering to an audience. You can bitch about Al Jazeera as much as you want, but it's just that they know that there are millions of Arabs that believe in a narrative that's a nationalist narrative, and it fucking sells. The Palestinian telecommunications company, right? The way they market is nationalism. Oh, we are the national telecommunications company. This wasn't like, it's kind of like, oh, America first here, right? But like, so they're going after what's good for them, right? And that's where the lack of leadership is, as we said, is telling people what they need to hear and what they want to hear. But the actual epistemology of the word to lead is to move forward, to die, right? You're the one at the front. So you're the first one who's going to get the brunt of whatever danger is there, right? It's the willingness to do this, right? And that's why the people behind you are willing to give you, status, give you more money, give you whatever it is, right? So it's a relationship. You're not a lead. You're not born leader. You're a leader because you're serving a purpose. You're providing protection. You're providing a narrative that explains the world in a way that makes the group feel good about themselves and does not require them to do much. So that's why the narrative of, the problem is the immigrants, the problem is the Arabs or whatever, is so seductive, because you don't need to do anything, right? The problem is all there, right? I don't need to change anything. Everything is fine with me, right? Make America great again. There was nothing wrong with us. All of this narrative about change is wrong and it's just whatever, right? So it's the barking up the wrong tree is not understanding that leadership and authority are not static. It's an actual relationship that's dynamic, that is relative, contextual, and fluid, right? You can flip the cards. You have, in the civil rights movement, is our audience American, international? What are they?
Everybody, from everywhere.
Okay. But just by background, the bus boycotts, there were a group of African Americans that would ride the buses to go to work, and they were a majority. And they were, because the laws were discriminatory, they had to sit at the back of the bus. So if a white person, a young white teenager, wanted to take a seat and there was an old black woman sitting, the black woman would have to stand up and give her seat to the young white man, right? So the value was white, not older, not women, right?
Yeah.
So when they did the math of, wait a second, we could just not ride the buses, right? We can go to work walking, or we can pool with people who have cars, right? And then they realized that no, it's the company that needs them, because they are the majority of the ridership. So the company was losing money if they didn't ride. Then they understood that the flipping of fabric, they were the ones who were powerful, not the bus company, right? So understand, that's leadership, is how do you look at a situation and redefine it in a way. You're not, it's not like you're creating things from thin air. It's just understanding that we have so much agency in the attitude and again, I'm not talking like positive BS, right? Like, you be positive. No, just be strategic, right? what's your purpose? Yes, this guy is racist and he pisses you off, but you're unable to get rid of him, right? So you're gonna need to find a way to live with him. So you better understand where they're coming from. Like racists are protecting something. It's not like, oh, I love being racist. Nobody sleeps thinking they're the bad guy. Nobody. Even Netanyahu, he's so egocentric. He genuinely thinks he's saving Israel, and that nobody, especially this attitude, you don't understand, you don't know, thinking that everybody else is naive and don't know how the real world is, right? And he knows what's best for Israel, and this patronizing look at the people. They don't know what's good for them. I'm doing it because it's my mission. I'm same, you know.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like sometimes I have to take that stance with Israelis and just tell them, look, even if you just see them as your enemy, wouldn't you want to understand your enemy better? Wouldn't that be a strategically beneficial move? Okay, we have some questions here. First from Justin. Nizar, since you were present and you were in the room, can you respond to the criticism that the Palestinians refused to accept peace proposals like the Camp David and Taba, and then later the Olmert plan? Justin says this is something that a lot of people bring up here. I think oftentimes they also bring it up in the context of like an unlimited right of return, and that the Israelis could not accept that, and that's something Palestinians desired. What can you say about the criticism that Palestinians refuse to accept peace proposals?
So yeah, because none of those proposals met the minimum requirements for Palestinians, right? So all of these proposals were not amazing, we were not generous. The claim that they were generous proposals is actually false. It might be generous from the Israeli side. They were thinking that they were giving a lot, but it was nowhere close to what the Palestinians wanted. So it's understandable that from the Israeli side, given their ignorance about what the Palestinian side is about, they would think that it's so generous. But from our perspective, it's actually offensive, right? So in Camp David, what was Barak's generous offer was at best, and they didn't share maps, they just discussed generally, right? Would be 3 cantons where we had no control over our border with Jordan. We actually didn't have control over any of our borders, our airspace or water. And there were other limitations. And literally, I dare anybody here or anybody outside, get me one elected Israeli official that actually accepted the idea of Palestinian sovereignty. To their credit, all of the Israeli electorate accepted autonomy or were willing to entertain autonomy. But actual sovereignty, none of them, not a single one. And that's at the crux of why all of these proposals were not good enough, is because there is unacceptability of the idea of a sovereign Palestinian state. And with that, there is not equality, right? So even here, I was having an argument with a woman that she's a mother and she's American, a Jewish American, supportive of Israel. And she was genuine. She gave me the same questions, like, why? I really want to understand what was wrong in those proposals. And I explained that to her. And when I told her like the issue of autonomy, she said, okay, what's wrong with autonomy? I told her, okay, how about Israel takes autonomy and we get sovereignty? Okay? If autonomy is not so bad, why don't Israelis, right, Jewish Israelis, have autonomy in a Palestine that's sovereign? It's exactly that. It's the fact that so many Israelis don't even entertain that Palestinians could possibly be equal, because they are committed to a state that is a Jewish majority, right? Rightly or wrongly, it's because of the experience of whenever the Jews were minority, they got discriminated against. Yes, right. But the idea that Israel has the right to demand that non-Israelis accept less rights in order for Jewish Israelis to be a majority in that state is unequal, right?
Can I
have that conversation? Yeah.
Yeah, can I? So
Yeah.
I know that Marty wants to ask a question, but Al is asking a question that I kind of want to sit on top of for a minute to respond to what you're saying.
Sure.
So Al is asking, is there something the Palestinian side could have done differently during the negotiations and that you wish they had done? And I think from reading newspapers from those Israelis at the time who were advocating for autonomy and not sovereignty, is that would be a pipeline towards sovereignty ultimately. They would say, let's just see how this works out, and then they'll have sovereignty. Do you think there is like a more incrementalist perspective that Palestinians could have adopted and would have been useful to them, that would have met the Israeli security concerns, whether valid or not? And is that something that you think Palestinians could have done differently?
They could have. The question is, why would they? Why would they accept to put up with a preference for the other party to test the Palestinian, right, before they allow them to have sovereignty, right? The fact that it is an inalienable right for people to determine what happens to them, right? Asking them to put this on the side and wait for incrementalism, right, is maybe preferable to the Israeli side, but why should the Palestinian people live another 10, 15 years until the Israelis are comfortable with Palestinians having sovereignty, right? It's just like, okay, why do you want civil rights to African Americans? They can wait. That was Kennedy's argument. He was arguing with MLK, you're going too fast. Okay, so you're asking African Americans to live under oppression for an inordinate amount of time, and that's like there isn't even a guarantee that you're going to get there. Right? Why would you accept that? How about we in 1948 or 47, the idea was to give Israelis or like Zionists some powers in Palestine, and if to see incrementally if the majority of the population that is not Jewish thinks or feels comfortable with Zionists having sovereignty.
The challenge is that none of this is in a vacuum on the Israeli side also. So they see disengagement from Gaza, they see Oslo as like a pilot program. Well, let's just test it out and see what happens. And from the Palestinian perspective, that might never have been even enough, right? Certainly not enough. But from the Israeli side, it's like, well, we tried that pilot program and it blew up in our faces. Now you want us to try again? And it puts future Israeli politicians at an enormous disadvantage.
But I also need people to understand that that's coming from not choosing to see something is a choice, right? The assessment that, we tried disengagement and it blew in our faces. What did they exactly, right?
Yeah, so there's a superficiality in the analysis.
Yeah, but no, it's just missing parts, right? Yes, from your perspective, it was a big deal, but it really doesn't matter what you think, right? It matters what the other side thinks. So I'll give you an example. When I was in negotiations, I think I gave you the example of Danny Tirza. Yeah, so I'll explain to people here. So when I was in negotiations, my Israeli counterpart, Danny Tirza, was responsible also for borders. So we were the two that at the technical level negotiated. And this guy is a right-wing, religious right-wing Israeli who lived in a settlement east of Ma'ale Adumim, Far Adumim, right? So extremely problematic. He's the guy who Sharon appointed to designate the route of the wall. He genuinely thinks Arabs have no business living in Israel. He's happy to tolerate them, but they definitely should not have sovereignty, right? So I have a gazillion reasons not to stand the guy, right? But ultimately, right, we came to a point where we were discussing something, and we were on a field trip, basically, trying to look at an area that used to be a no man's land. And we're in the valley, and we're looking at a hill called the Latrun area, no man's land. And Danny was going on and on about these villages, and this village is called so-and-so, and that's an Arabization of the Hebrew name of the town. And this other village, the mayor is from this clan, and this clan used to be a Maccabean tribe that then got what have you. And I'm looking at him and it's like, wow, like my master's dissertation was about the letter. Like I know it very well, right? But yet Danny and I are looking at the same hill, but we're seeing very different things, right? So that's when I realized, and he also realized, that the purpose of negotiating, that why we're negotiating, is to find if there is an agreement that works for both of us. So our job is to figure out what works for the other and making sure that the other understands what works for us. The fact that I think a nuclear state like Israel, that has the 6th strongest army in the world, has security issues is preposterous. My opinion on that is irrelevant, because until I can agree with Danny on an article on security that he thinks is safe enough, regardless of how ridiculous I think it is, he's not gonna sign. And the fact that Danny genuinely does not think that Arabs have any business being in Israel, right? That is, his opinion is not relevant, because I'm not gonna sign on an agreement that gives him the kind of safety and security that he wants if I do not get the state, the independent Palestinian state, the way I define it, right? You don't negotiate with your friends, you negotiate with your enemies, with people that you disagree with, because, and therefore it's your job to figure out what is, and this is what about what Palestinians could have done differently. It's having this internal conversation of, what do we really want in Jerusalem? What do we really want on the refugee issues? What do we really want on borders? And what are we willing to give up in order to get this more important thing? That is something that never happened. And that is, I would consider it criminal negligence on the part of the Palestinian leadership. There are a bazillion reasons for it, right? But they're still responsible for not doing that. They had a choice, engaging people and telling them what they needed to hear, not what they wanted to hear, and they chose not to. They just, kind of like what's happening in the States also, right? Where we tiptoe on issues and not actually deal with them head on and deal with how disgusting it is, right? You gotta deal with it.
Al, I hope that answers your question. We're gonna bring Marty on to the stage real quick. Marty, if you want to show up. You might need to raise your hand one more time, Marty. And if not, I think I might just be able to grab you. Okay, here you are. Okay. Marty, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I also was going to ask some questions regarding Camp David, but given that you said it was unacceptable, I'm wondering, in hindsight, do you have any reservations about that? That, I would think, I can't put myself in a Palestinian shoes. It just seems to me, though, that in hindsight, I think some Palestinians would say, historically, gee, it would have been better had we accepted the 1937 Peel Commission or the 1939 McDonald White Paper or the 1947 UN Partition Plan and so forth. But do Palestinians honestly think they're better off because they haven't done so?
No. So part of it is that the Palestinian narrative gets suppressed, right? So the ruse was that Barack and Clinton were disappointed in Arafat, that he tricked them. He was so amenable up to this point, and then he suddenly became stubborn. So they blamed Arafat, when actually what he said is, this is a good start, let's talk more, right? Nobody registered that. There was only one article by Rob Malley and I think Aga that spoke about that. But in the general media, nobody registered that. It was blaming Arafat. He torpedoed it, whatever, right? So that's actually actually not true. And I remember very well, like, I was scared that Arafat was gonna sign that agreement. Like, I was gonna kill him if he did. And I was so happy that he didn't, and really respected him for realizing that none of us Palestinians were happy with what Camp David was offering. So like, there is this, are you really representative? Like, it's getting somebody in power to just sign an agreement, right, without the people actually backing it, is a stupid idea. It really is, right? Now, the issue of incrementalism, are you back? Like, of course, everything in hindsight seems better. But back then in 1947 or 1938, I think, was the, for Palestinians who were a majority, were Jewish Zionists, let's say, or even Jews in general, were less than, during the Peel Commission, it was 15%. Up to 1947, Jews were around 30% of the population, half of whom were recent immigrants who came after the Second World War, right? Why would they get 55% of the land, and like the coastal ones, the more important ones, the ones that were the industry, like the biggest economic part, when the rest of the population, the majority of the population is not Jewish, But more importantly, like we've lived here for millennia, and partition never actually worked, right? So in the culture, in not only Palestine but across the Arab and Muslim world, it was about what's called as living together, right? So it's not because coexisting, you're putting up with the other, you're tolerating the other. But in our culture, it's like, no, that's not enough. You need the ethnicities or religious groups to work together to build an environment that gives each side the space that they want that's individual, and then agree on what happens in the shared space, right? So the idea of partition was alien to even if they were Zionists, right, Arab Zionists, they still thought the idea of partition practically wouldn't work. Now, so definitely back then, people would not have thought that. Now, okay, let's say it gets offered again, the partition, right? Now Palestinians are saying, fine, it's better to have a state, right, where we're independent, even if it's just 20% of what we thought is what we think is our historical homeland, right, than to continue suffering for longer, right? And that was on offer, right? But for Israeli Zionists, it wasn't enough. They wanted something that's autonomy, not actual sovereignty, because they didn't feel safe enough, right? So the stuck is a feeling, right? Is there is a trauma, a multi-generational, multi-millennia trauma of you are not safe for being Jewish, right? There is nothing, you did nothing to be Jewish. You just were born and found out that you were Jewish, right? And people, didn't matter if you have a PhD, it didn't matter you always wear flowers and you're a pacifist. The reason that just when somebody thinks even that you're Jewish, you're gonna be discriminated against, right? So it feels like you need to be, you need your own state where you could be safe, right? It's understandable. Now, if getting that is only going to happen by with other parties getting less of their rights, I don't see how this could happen, right? That's the challenge, is that it sucks, sure, but it wasn't a land with no people for a people with no land. There were plenty of people, right? And like, for example, in 1919, the Woodrow Wilson, the American president, sent a commission to the Levant, to Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Palestine back then, to see what the British and the French were up to. He wanted to see what you want to know what's happening. It's called the King Crane Commission. And back then, the idea of self-determination was something that, in fact, Woodrow Wilson was backing and had coined. That commission, they said, while we see favorably the Zionist project, no one we spoke with was for it. All the Arabs are against it. And even the British officers we spoke with did not see how the Zionist project could be implemented without military force, right? So it was obvious back in 1919 that you needed military force to have this happen, right? So it's not like, oh, the war suddenly happened. No, it's like the Zionists felt that they have a right to self-determination, which is correct. And if that right was going to come at the expense of others, so be it. That's the problem, is the so be it part of it.
By the way, that King Crane Commission, I think Adar and I joked at one point that that's the Corey Gilschuster of the early 1920s. They go around asking lots of people questions. I put the link in the chat. If you want to look into it, you could actually just see the breakdown, what question they asked and what percentage of people said what. It's fascinating. We could do a deep dive into that at some point. Marty, I want to make sure that you're satisfied with the question. Nizar, to close the loop on what you're saying,
my question was simply, are there any Palestinians who say, gee, in hindsight, we would have been better off accepting one of those earlier offers? Yeah. And from your answer, I'm guessing the answer is no, that the majority, think they're better off, staying on the path that they're on. Is that
yeah, so there are, I've heard it from some Palestinians who said that, but I would say that maybe they're 5%. The majority is saying, no, we have full rights, why should we accept less than full rights, right? So there is a question of also human dignity. So often there's this misconception that the Palestinian plight is one of economy, of quality of life. And actually, that's like statistically or like empirically, that's not right, because back in the during the first Intifada, before the Intifada in 1985 and 86, the economy in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip was doing much better than Jordan and Egypt, right? So it was not about economic situation; it was about actual self-determination and dignity. Like, I have the freedom to decide what to do. Why should a New Yorker Jew tell me where I could or cannot go in my own town just because he's Jewish, right? And similarly, in '99, the Palestinian economy was doing pretty well. It was a question of dignity. It's like, no, we have full rights. Why should we be 3/5 human? Why do Jewish people across the globe have a right to come and live here and get full rights and have citizenship, but somehow Palestinians get autonomy, even those that actually have the keys to the actual houses, while somebody who claims that one of their grandparents happened to be Jewish suddenly have superior rights to people who literally have lived there for millennia. So that's, and I'm not blaming here as much as the ignorance about that is what landed this. So of course the Israeli Zionist side sees itself wronged because it didn't have the full picture. It was under the impression that, yeah, these are Arabs and they would benefit from a modern state that is going to have a very strong economy. Yeah, so from the perspective of the Zionists, that seemed like a good choice for the Arabs, but it's not up to them to decide how the Arabs choose. The Arabs get to choose the way they want to choose. Otherwise, that's not a choice, right? If you want the Arabs to choose the way you want them to choose, then they're not really choosing, are they, right? Just like here in the US, it's like, just get out of poverty. Like, why did you choose to be poor,
Yeah. For people who are poor, why don't they just buy more money?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Nizar, just about that, and Justin, I know you have something to say, and I'm sure that it's relevant. I guess one of the limitations of this format is that I want to go in order of people that had raised their hands. So we'll get to you in just a bit. Shadow Disc is asking, and I do think that this might piggyback nicely here. So, what level of violence did Palestinians expect Israel would face, right, if a contiguous true state was offered? So, for example, did they expect that what Gaza has experienced now would be the result, or that there would be some level of terrorism post a two-state solution that Israel would be expected to tolerate? I think this question came up when we were still discussing the Oslo, Camp David.
I would argue that, again, the majority would have seen that if we had a fully sovereign Palestinian state, right, then it's not in our interest to get into war. Actually, the argument was, and we did argue this, that we wanted Palestine and Israel to join NATO, right? Because we are a sovereign state. The last thing we want is the Iranians marching and like occupying. Like, we had this argument with the Iranians where they're like the nuclear weapon and what have you. And we're telling them, you realize if like you use nuclear weapons on Israel, we're the ones who also would die. He said, yeah, you'll be martyrs. It's like, okay, could we choose when we want to be martyrs? Can we have influence over this decision? Could you not choose that for us? So it's a different context. Actually, that's actually a very good question. That it does matter. The context does matter. Now under occupation, yes, it's unfair to ask Palestinians not to use military means. They could choose to use nonviolence, but you actually cannot ask them to not use military means. That's not your prerogative. They are the ones who are occupied and whose rights are curtailed, truncated. Therefore, they have a right to try to get their rights any way they see fit, right? Now, if they are an independent state like Egypt or Jordan, right, then we're invested in peace. We're invested in fighting terrorism. We're invested in anyone that thinks, and that's the key thing with the state, right? Is you don't get to like get us into a war just because like Hamas wouldn't be able to pull shit like that in a democratic Palestinian state, because like the state needs to decide whether it goes into war or not. This situation of not real state, because you call it the Palestinian Authority, but it actually has very little authority, right? So it's a different context. When you're a sovereign state and your parliament decides to go to war, then of course you have decided, you've democratically elected to go to war, and then you suffer the consequences, right? So many Palestinians argue this against Israel, is for 4 elections, y'all chose a right-wing party that specifically said that there will not be a Palestinian state. So what do you want from us? Aren't you a democracy? The majority, 4 times, said not a Palestinian state on our. Okay, then they want war, right? Now, did they expect this to be this much? No. My guess is when Hamas pulled this off, they expected a very strong response. But I think they had wagered that Israel wouldn't be able to continue the war for more than 2 to 3 months. The weighing in of the US so strongly was something they were surprised of. The fact that the UAE and Saudi Arabia were compensating Israel of the goods, whether food or others, that were coming through the Red Sea that got blocked by the Houthis. They were shipping goods and food to Israel through Jordan when they were not sending food to Gaza, right? Like there's all of this BS of, the Jordanian king being on the plane and like dropping food to Gazans. It's like, fuck you. Like you helped, Israel overcome the blockade from the Houthis, right? And now you're throwing some leftover food to the Gazans. Like, no, don't get me started about how the Arab states were on the Israeli side, not on the Palestinian side.
Nivio here is asking, are you implying if Palestinians were offered more land, let's say like 70%, I think this might have been in reaction to like, oh, they were only offered 3 cantons with no border control.
Good question.
Let's say like 70% in 1948, they would have likely accepted?
Back in 1947, no, because again, you're judging after Israel got recreated. But if you think in 1947, the idea of a Jewish European state, right? A state that is, a nation state that is built by European immigrants. And that's very important to understand that for the Arabs, these people were foreign. They might have been Jewish, but they're not Arab Jews, right? They're not of the same culture. So what they wanted to impose is a different kind of country, right? Tel Aviv, like one of the proof is that Tel Aviv, unlike all other Mediterranean cities, is built with houses facing the sea, while all Mediterranean cities know that you need the houses, the corridors, to be towards the sea so that you let the air in and to lessen the heat, right? Like that, it's that offense. It's like, you guys are not from here. You don't know. You planted, conifers when conifers are foreign to this place, and now you're surprised that you're having all of these forest fires. Yes, they're not from here, right? So they wouldn't have accepted in 1947. But as far as in the negotiations, when we were discussing space or like land, there was the principle of that we've accepted the two-state solution on 22% of historic Palestine. So we were fine if we got the same size, right? So if it's 6,200 square kilometers of land between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, we can swap lands where ultimately we still get 6,200 square kilometers. However, if Israel wants to take 1%, exchange 1%, and that 1% is East Jerusalem, right? Because East Jerusalem is 1% of the size of the West Bank. It's like that still wouldn't work because, like, qualitatively speaking, East Jerusalem matters a lot for us, whether Christian or Muslim, right? There is so much of Palestinian identity that has to do with we are the people of the Holy Land who safeguarded and maintain the Holy Land, right? So it's like, no, East Jerusalem matters a lot, of course. And with the agreement on how to manage Jerusalem in such a way that first that freedom of religion would be guaranteed, right, to everyone, including, and this is part of the particularity of this conflict, is that Jerusalem means so much to literally billions of people that are not in Jerusalem and who will not suffer the consequences of whatever regime is there, right? So there's that. And second, that it needs to actually be a functional city. It needs to have an economy that's functioning and therefore tourism, right? So nobody argues for a solid border. We need to negotiate how the city would operate, because everybody agrees that it operates in a certain way. But that sovereignty issues are separate from administrative, economic, and religious issues. All of these can be parceled in different ways. But ultimately, Palestinians do want actual sovereignty over the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, including East Jerusalem, and like the type of relationship between Palestine and Israel would need to be some sort of like EU economic integration, because also our economies are intertwined, right? So it's never thought as a hard border.
So Nizar, we're gonna try something different now. I mean, if insofar as you still have just a little bit longer, there's a lot of questions, a lot of people raise their hand, a lot of things that want to be brought up. So what we're gonna do is get off the stage and move to just a free-flowing room where anybody can ask a question, engage in the chat as they wish. Adara is gonna be there as well to make sure that the conversation stays on track if we need to, but ideally, he doesn't need to do any moderation, and everything will just be calm, or as boisterous as necessary. Nizar, thank you very much for joining.
Cool, Nizar, welcome back. We were gossiping about you, but it was really only good stuff. Yeah, Justin, we can hear you loud and clear.
Oh, I was muted for some reason. I just left and came back. So anyways, I was speaking and when Al was speaking. So I want to thank Nizar. He's always a good person to have to hear his perspective. And I don't want to say this, but you really confirmed a lot of what I say to people here all the time. And that's why I asked you the question about the issue regarding the negotiations, that the famous expression, and I think, what's his name? Jared Kushner said it. The thing is, never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. I think it's him, but it was...
Well, he took it from Abba Iban.
Yeah, exactly. I know it wasn't his originally. So the questions that you got mainly from two people here who kind of take this perspective, it was Marty and Al. And I think that it shows a really lack of how the mindset of Israelis and the mindset of Palestinians are different. And it even is playing into this current war. Like, the question is, do you think that there's Palestinians now who say, damn it, we should have did the 1947 partition, we would have been better off? Or the Peel Commission? And like you said, I think probably 5% would say, yeah, maybe we should have did it, it would have been better off. But majority of people, and I think that Israelis and other people who are not Palestinian have this perspective that we're stubborn people. We're very stubborn people because we want our rights. And we feel that the more and more that we accommodate, because even accepting a two-state solution on 22% of Palestine, it turned it into a situation where we were bargaining over the last 22%, because people are saying, well, you know, you're not going to get everything, but dude, we already started with 22%. So let's go back to 1947 and let's base the negotiations based on the Peel Commission or 1947. And so we're to blame because we said, oh, you refused the right of return to Palestine, which is something internally we do have to decide what we want. We need to say to ourselves, what are we going to do about the right of return? Is it just to the future state of Palestine? Are we going to demand they go back to the 1948 territories? This is something internally that we do have to have, but it's one thing that's used against us to destroy the entire house. But it's also saying, like, and I've had conversations with a particular person who happens to not be here, but his wife is here, is that you should be happier with a unilateral withdrawal because it's better than what you have now. And because you will have Palestinian policemen who will come and patrol your streets, you know, clean up, sweep your streets, etc. And I kind of said to him, no, I don't want Palestinian policemen if it's going to be a limited autonomous area. I'd rather you come and do the occupation yourself directly and you take the burden of occupation rather than outsource it. But I don't think they understand this, because this 1.5 state solution that they've been trying to impose with us is a source of problem. And they're saying, well, the violence will stop and you guys will stop dying. And even they extend this to Gaza, where they're telling Palestinians that fleeing to Egypt is better than dying in Gaza. And, you know, I think Palestinians think long-term. They think, hey, maybe it'll get us out of Gaza, but it'll create for us, you know, a Yarmouk situation or a Sabra and Shatila situation in the future.
When they've done that, thank you very much.
Yeah, and it's like, and then you know, they're like telling us to do this, but you're taking into consideration, and then this whole, what you said, incrementalism. Incrementalism is that if Israel said, we're going to pull out of the West Bank and we're going to establish a state But meanwhile, we're not going to continue to build settlements, seize lands, take your natural resources. Then I could say, okay, let's hold off for 5 years, a unilateral withdrawal, etc. But what's offered is we have a belligerent state that has one thing saying that they want a solution, but on the other hand, they're supporting these terrorists that are terrorizing Palestinians and building settlements and expanding them, and they just announced 22 settlements. And this is why they don't understand this. And I think that these people like Marty and Al, you have to understand, we're dealing with somebody who has a clear history, a clear intent. And you have to take this into consideration when you criticize Palestinians and say, why are they not accepting just a small solution? Because a small solution is a slow death to us.
Yeah. So, I mean, to be fair, Oslo was incremental, right? The challenge with Oslo is that it had sufficiently ambiguous language, and that's by design. There's a theory of constructive ambiguity. You can thank Kissinger for that. That was saying that the two sides are so far apart from each other, you're going to need to have something that's ambiguous enough so that each side can sell it to their constituents, so that you just, get 5 years of interim period where the two sides start trusting each other. And which is true in negotiations, it's way harder without trust. The more trust you have, trust is like the lubricant of negotiations, right? So it is worth it to invest in trust rather than just going full throttle and have it so much friction. Right? There's less likelihood of success. Spend like 5 years, even 10 years, 20 years, even a generation building trust, because then with that trust, you can have a process that is sustainable. And I give the example of Tunisia. In Tunisia, they are actually extremely polarized. The seculars and the Islamists cannot stand each other. So much so that in their weddings, their chants in the wedding are about killing the other side, or like, the mother of the other side, right? That's how, culturally entrenched the polarization is. However, because before 5 years before the revolution, the different political parties were meeting and trying to figure out what kind of Tunisia they wanted in the future, the secularists and the Islamists got to know each other, right? They still disagreed, right? But they knew each other, they knew each other's ideologies and what was the most important thing and what they were willing to be flexible on. So when you had the